Welcome to another wonderful Susannah Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susannah Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Bride's Christmas Goose. Chapter 1. Missy stared in shock and horror. The wagon driver deposited her husband Theodore, and all of their worldly belongings by the side of the road and then clucked to his mule team. Over the retreating sounds of hooves, harness bells, and the squeak of wheels, Missy felt her world crumble out from under her. Theodore joined her, grinning happily, as he stared at their new home. "Like it?" he asked, his thumbs stuck proudly in his belt. "Come on, tell me the truth now." "You love it." Missy wanted to sit down and weep until she died. Or fainted. Whichever came first. She did neither, mostly because Theodore would never notice. He would just continue to happily extol the virtues of their new home while she rotted into the dirt. 160 acres of barren wasteland. Not the green prairie watered by rain and with the Platte River running close by as he had promised her. Nor the sleek herds he had promised. Instead, the few head of skinny cows scattered about grazed on thin grass, raising their heads to blink at the newcomers as they chewed. A small lean-to stood as the home Theodore swore he would carry her into, crossing the threshold as though it were their wedding night. I told myself it was too good to be true. I told myself. I should have listened. Missy knew full well her husband dreamed big, but acted small. His words and promises constantly tended toward exaggeration. Missy knew it, and had known she shouldn't believe him regarding this new venture. But she'd fallen for his sworn oaths yet again. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Time after time, Missy had reminded herself of that painful truth. This time, however, she had not. She'd let Theodore sell their small modest home in Missouri, stake a homestead claim for prime grazing acres, and buy fares on a stagecoach to Nebraska. Now they stood at the tiny lane to their property, and Missy knew he had gone too far this time. She glanced longingly at the wagon driver disappearing down the road, wondering if she ran, if she might catch up to him and beg him to take her back to town. Then what? Leave Theodore? Go home to Missouri? She had no family there or anywhere else for that matter. Neither did Theodore. She had no one to take her in. She had no place to go. She was stuck, unless she returned to town and got a job as a tavern girl. Missy? Unable to look at Theo, Missy picked up a canvas bag and walked on unsteady legs toward the lean-to. Shelter. Fire. Yes, fire is good. It gets cold out here at night. Might be warm in September during the day, cooler at night. Winter is coming on. Of course, we had to arrive just as autumn approaches. Next come the deadly gales of winter, with only a lean-to for protection. She shut her teeth hard to prevent a wild bray of laughter. Missy. Half turning, she now regarded her husband over her shoulder. In sickness and in health, she muttered. In good times, and in bad, till death do us part. Are you happy now, Theo? You just killed us. Till death do us part. She walked on, half hearing him run to catch up to her. She gazed blankly ahead, murmuring her marriage vows under her breath. Missy, look at me. Seizing her by the shoulders, Theodore forced her eyes up to his. I swear I will take care of you, Missy. I will build a house for us. I know it's not what I thought it would be here, but that's not my fault. It never is, Missy said, walking past him. It never is. Chapter 2. Theo made good on one promise. He immediately began work on a house. First, he made the lean-to a shade more livable by extending the roof and adding a fire pit. Then, he planed lumber cut from trees he felled by the river and stacked them into neat piles. When not helping him drag tree trunks, Missy carried rocks from the river, one by one, and set them nearby for a future fireplace. Her hands red and raw, she worked from dawn until dusk, coming blizzards on her mind. She spoke to Theo only when necessary, and as they both dropped to sleep on the bare earth of the lean-to after eating at night, she wasn't forced to do more than grunt a word of fatigue. When the cattle wandered and they lost a day hunting them down, Theo insisted they needed to build a fence. He cut saplings for fencing, and used some of their meager funds to buy barbed wire in town. He cut his hand stretching the wire as Missy nailed it to the fence posts. Every night she put salve on his cuts, and every day he broke them open stretching more wire. "Missy," he said one night as she doctored his wicked slashes, "Old man Davis said he'd sell me his bull for $5. Missy frowned. What kind of bull sells for $5? Maybe he's not really a bull. The old man says the animal is young, and he just wants to get rid of him. Says he has other bulls and don't need him no more." "Theo, we don't have much money," she said, wrapping his hands in the linen cloth she just washed. "Do we really need a bull?" He sighed, exasperated. "Of course, we do. How are we going to raise cattle out here without a bull?" She waved her hand toward the tiny pasture. "Maybe one of those cows is pregnant with one. There. Free bull." He snorted. "If one of them is pregnant, and if one is a bull, it'll be years before it can breed. We have to have this bull, Missy." "Whatever you say," she replied, too weary to continue arguing. "Not that you ever listen to me, anyway. You'll do as you please. Right? I do what's best for us." He tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "Missy, I love you." Plumb worn out, she turned her back on him and went to their makeshift bed, a pallet of straw on the hard-packed earth. In the distance, thunder rumbled. All day she had smelled rain on the wind. Hopefully, the thin roof over their heads didn't leak. She lay down next to the fire, pulling her blanket up to her chin. For a long while, Theo merely sat where he was. "Will you ever warm up to me again?" he asked. "Maybe. Someday." 3 days later, a group of cowboys herded a huge brown and white bull with short, sharp horns down the road toward their property. Missy walked back from the river with yet another smooth rock in her hands, eyeing the massive bull with concern. The creature didn't appear as mild-natured as the bulls she knew back in Missouri. Theo let down the wire into the small pasture he and Missy fenced in, and the cowboys herded the bull inside. The bull took one look at the astonished bovines and trotted toward them, his tail high. "He doesn't look so young to me," Missy said as Theo put the fence back up and joined the cowboys. "Mrs. Cartwright," one of the cowboys said as they all doffed their hats. "That there is a good breeding bull, mark my words. Even if he is a bit crazy." "Crazy?" "Now, don't you worry a bit, Mrs. Cartwright," one of the others added. "He may not be right in the head, but he's a good bull." Missy watched with trepidation, Theo with delight, as their new bull got acquainted with his new harem. "No wonder the old man sold him for $5, Missy muttered as the cowboys put spurs to hides and galloped back the way they had come. "Only you would buy a crazy bull." "Come on, Missy," Theo complained. "He's behind the fence, ain't he? You heard what they said, he's a good breeder. Won't his offspring be as crazy as he is?" Missy's worry appeared lost on Theo as she walked back to her chore of collecting river stones. Theo watched his new prize with a wide grin on his face. Chapter 3. I would like a proper home by Christmas. Missy stood in her shift, stockings, and shoes, pinning wet laundry to the line Theo had strung between the tiny house and a pole he stuck in the ground. She wasn't too concerned about anyone dropping by unexpectedly. Very seldom did anyone walk, ride, or rumble by their property. "That's my promise, dear." The day had proven unseasonably warm and breezy. Theo stripped his coat off as he planed more lumber from trees he'd chopped down. His stack of ready planks grew, but too slowly. Chopping down trees and splitting them took much precious time. The simple lean-to kept the late summer rains off their head, and the prairie grass kept them off the dirt and warmer during the chilly nights. But they both knew that as autumn moved in and with it, winter, they could not continue as they were. The cattle needed care, and the post holes Theo dug for the house frame filled with rainwater and needed draining before he could plant the posts. The house building inched along too slowly for Missy's peace of mind. Complaining about dragging the down trees by hand, Theo wanted to buy a mule from the old man up the road, but Missy put her foot down. They needed to save their money. Tomorrow, Missy said firmly, we begin the actual building the house. Right? Whatever you say, wife. It took some bullying on her part, as Theo wanted to extend the pasture fence, but by day's end, a sweaty, filthy Missy admired 3 tall tree trunks firmly planted in the ground. Now, we will have a proper house, she said with relief. Thank you, Theo. By Christmas, Theo replied. I promise. Missy gave him a hopeful smile. When the cattle escaped yet again, Missy reluctantly agreed to extending the fence. 2 days and another roll of barbed wire later, she cut heavy limbs from a downed tree with a hatchet, stripping them of smaller branches for Theo to use as fence posts. He dug post holes in the dirt, his back to the cattle. Taking a moment to stretch her back and wipe her sweaty face, Missy noticed the bull staring at Theo. With rising alarm, she also noticed Theo worked inside the small pasture, not outside. Theo, she called, worry making her voice pitched high. I think you should get out of there. Why? The bull lowered his head and pawed the ground, restless. He snorted, his thin tail flapping in agitation. Theo, get out of there now. Her heart hammered in her chest. Something was going to happen. The bull charged. Missy screamed. Theo turned around in time for the bull's heavy head. One horn plunged into his chest. The bull threw his head back, bellowing, slobbering at the mouth, trying to throw Theo's stricken body off his horn. Limp, Theo fell, thumping over the bull's massive shoulder to hit the ground. Spinning, the bull lunged again, pinning Theo, shoving him across the thin grass, now slick with Theo's blood. Seizing a heavy stick, Missy ran at the bull, raging and screaming. Striking the crazed animal in the face, head and neck, she drove the bull off Theo and chased him away. Still screaming and crying, Missy knelt beside Theo's torn and battered body. He was dead. Chapter 4. Missy buried Theo by the river under the shade of a leafless weeping willow. She had no black clothing for mourning, so she used the cloth from a dark blue petticoat to create a veil. Old Man Davis, leaning on his cane, stood near her, staring down as his sons shoveled dirt onto Theo's makeshift coffin. A preacher droned prayers from the Bible, hardly glancing at the new widow. People from the area and the village of Sulphur Springs, whether they knew the Cartwrights or not, came to the funeral. Mr. Davis placed a gnarled hand on her shoulder. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Cartwright. Accept my condolences. Dry-eyed and numb, Missy nodded. Thank you. I'd sure be pleased if you'd move down yonder to my place. I have a small house I built for my boy for when he's old enough to marry. We can build him another. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for your kind offer. But this is my home. I will stay here. But you are kind, sir. But my answer is no. Before he could speak again, Missy walked back toward her tiny home as the Davis boys tamped down the last clods of dirt on Theo's grave. I will build him a marker, Missy thought. People trailed singly and in pairs in her wake, murmuring their own words of sorrow. The people of the area had little, and many were as poor as Missy. Yet, several brought gifts. A pair of milk goats. A cage full of live chickens. A slab of smoked beef, jars of pickled eggs, meat, and corn sealed with wax. Leaning against the stacks of lumber were small sacks of flour and salt, and tethered to a post was a small donkey, complete with harness. No, Missy exclaimed, spinning, searching for the donkey's owner. I can't take that. It's too much. A young woman with her arm through a young man's arm stepped forward, smiling. I'm Susan Briggs, and this is my husband, Bill. We are so sorry for your loss, but we want you to keep him. I was a mail-order bride, and married Bill a few years ago. We have been blessed with both a horse and a mule, and the donkey was a gift to us. We wish to pass on this blessing to you." "It's too much," Missy whispered. "You mustn't." "Keep him," Bill said, his voice grave. "You need him more than we do." "We live on the other side of town," Susan said. "We'd be honored to have you as our friend." Still numb, Missy nodded as Susan embraced her, and then the pair of them walked to their horse, harnessed to a small trap. As the villagers and farmers paid their respects, Missy stood in silence, at last tears rolling down her cheeks under her makeshift veil. Old Man Davis took her hand. "I'll send my boys down to look in on you now and again. Whatever you need, you let me know." Unable to speak, Missy nodded. She watched him climb slowly onto his horse, as his sons mounted up on theirs. Tipping their hats to her, they rode down the road and vanished. Alone at last, Missy stared out at the barren landscape of her husband's claim. "I can do this," she said. "I can turn this ugliness into beauty, bring his dreams to life." She glanced up into the sky toward the setting sun. "I promise you, Theo. I promise." Concerned she'd lose the goats to the ravenous coyotes that were already beginning to yap on the plains, Missy built a makeshift pen in a corner inside the lean-to, behind the fire. With plenty of cut grass to nibble and sleep on, they could stay through the nights in safety. She unharnessed the donkey and let him in with the cattle. She hoisted the chickens in their cage up a tree with a rope, needing to keep them safe as well. "I'll need a barn before I need a house," she muttered. Storing her jars on a shelf in the shed, she stacked the sacks of flour and salt in the corner opposite the goats. She hung the side of beef up alongside the rest of the food Theo had gathered before his death: slabs of venison from the deer he shot, sheaves of corn, onions, a small sack of potatoes, another of sugar, and their own stores of flour and salt. Missy estimated she had enough food to last several months. But to survive the coming winter, she'd probably need 5 times this amount. Not feeling hungry, she forced herself cut a chunk of beef with her knife, and sat beside the cold fire pit to chew on it. Watching the stars emerge one by one, she wondered if Theo was with God now. He should be. For all his faults, Theo was a good man. Missy knew she should grieve for him. "I will, in time. I don't have the wherewithal right now, Theo. And while I never told you often enough, I do love you." The next morning, after loosing the goats and chickens, Missy picked up a stout branch and strode into the cows' pasture. The big bull stared at her, watching her come, absently chewing his grass. The cows retreated from her, huge brown eyes wide. Walking toward the bull, Missy showed him her club. "You took my husband from me," she snarled. "There is no reason I shouldn't shoot you dead right now. So this is what you're going to do. You are going to breed me a fine herd of cattle, and you will never give me an ounce of trouble. You hear me?" As though he understood her, the bull bowed his head, backing slowly away from her menace. She knew he wasn't afraid of her. But perhaps, he respected her. Which was all she needed from him. Chapter 5. Utilizing the boards Theo cut and planed and the stout posts he created from trees he cut, Missy began building a small barn to hold the chickens and goats. First, she dug post holes a short distance from where she and Theo planned their house, and, using the donkey, dragged the tall posts from the river. Without the sturdy little creature, she could never have done it on her own. Naming the donkey Jimmy, she lavished him with affection, and gave him treats of corn. In his turn, Jimmy worked hard, stopping in his traces and waiting patiently while she cleared the path for dragging or held the post in place while she shoveled the hole in with dirt. Once the post set, she bored holes in the boards and posts with an awl, then pegged the boards to the posts. She created 3.5 walls, keeping one small section open for a gate. As she pondered the roof, she wondered how she could get the slender poles up there to create a lattice that would hold the thatch. Staring at Jimmy, she had a thought. "Listen, Jimmy," she said to him, lifting his fuzzy face to hers. "I know what I'm going to ask of you is a little odd, but bear with me, all right?" Leading him to the side of the shed, she swung up onto his back. Balancing herself carefully, she used the shed as security and stood up. Jimmy swished his tail and glanced over his shoulder. He sighed down his nose. Missy clapped her hands. Now she had a way to get the poles atop the roof and a means to spread the thatch. It took her a week to build the tiny barn, and when finished, she admitted to herself it looked a bit lopsided. But it held Jimmy, the goats, and the chickens with room to spare, and the door she built swung easily on rope hinges. Tying old gunny sacks into the corners of the shed, she created nesting spots off the floor for the chickens so neither Jimmy nor the goats would step on the eggs they would lay. While she felt proud of her accomplishment, she also felt dismayed. Her hands were chapped beyond recognition, and the light breeze held a hint of chill, announcing winter lay but a month in the future. The days grew shorter, giving her less and less time to work. How could she build the house by herself? She might survive for a time with a fire burning all night, but could she live through the winter in a three-sided lean-to? Native Indians survived, and mountain men she learned about spent winters in the high country with far less than she. But still, she doubted her chances. The thought of Christmas approaching filled her with sadness. This was not going to be the precious holiday she'd always savored in the past. She'd thought that she and Theo would celebrate together, in their new sturdy home. Reality was so far from her vision, that she had to push all thoughts of the holiday out of her head. It'll just be another day, she thought. Just another day. Mr. Davis, as promised, sent his boys down to check on her. On one such visit, they brought with them 2 yearling heifers. "Pa feels terrible that the bull he sold your husband done killed him," said Sam. Or was it Ted? As she couldn't tell one from the other, she smiled equally at them both. "He wants to help. Tell him I said thank you," Missy said, letting them herd the young ladies into their new home. The boys tipped their hats, leaped onto their horses and raced each other home, leaving Missy to wonder how she was going to feed all these animals and herself through the long cold winter. Missy may have managed to build one small barn for small animals, but how could she build a proper house? How could she fence in the entire 160 acres? The cattle should feed themselves on the lush Nebraska grasslands, but she had no horse to round them up if she let them loose to graze as the other ranchers did. While she could shoot and hunt as well as Theo, she would need to dig a cellar to store food for the winter, a place that would keep meat frozen and out of the reach of varmints. If she was to survive, she also needed to begin gathering food and storing it away immediately. Right then, she needed supplies. Harnessing Jimmy early in the morning, she rigged some short poles to hang sacks on, then led him down the road. The village of Sulphur Springs lay 5 miles east of her property, and as the day was mild, she made good time. A few farmers and cowboys she saw on her way waved and called out, and she returned the gestures. To her delight and surprise, she found Susan and Bill Briggs walking out of the general store as she led Jimmy up and tied him to the rail. "Missy." Susan all but launched herself down the steps and into Missy's friendly embrace. More sedate, Bill walked down with a broad smile and kissed her cheek. "You look good," Susan exclaimed. "And look at the donkey. I swear he's gained weight. If he has, it's because of the corn treats he gets." Missy dug in her pocket and offered a few kernels to Jimmy, who munched them happily. "I named him Jimmy." Susan laughed. "How appropriate. How are you, Missy? I've wanted so much to come out and see you, but we have had so much to do at our place." "I get lonely," Missy admitted. "Jimmy is good company, but the goats aren't as friendly unless I have food." Susan tucked her arm through Missy's and walked her away from Bill, who sat down on the store's steps to wait. "I've been thinking, Missy," she said, her tone low. "I know it's not my place to speak on this, but I'm worried. I don't like the idea of any woman alone out there. Now, I know you're capable, you're proving that. But maybe you need to marry again." Missy shook her head. "To who? Old man Davis?" "No, and his sons are just boys. Everyone around here is either too old, too young, or married already." "I didn't mean marry someone from here," Susan said, her eyes intent upon Missy's. "I was a mail-order bride. You can be, too. But, that's my land. Theo is buried there. I don't want to leave it." "Who says you have to?" As Missy stared, confused, Susan walked on, making Missy walk with her. Maybe you can find a husband to marry you, she said slowly, and one willing to come to you. Do they do that? Only one way to find out. Susan pulled a note from her pocket. This is the mail-order bride agency. Write to them first. Then see if any responses you get are from men who are not deeply ingrained in their town or property. Missy felt reluctant, despite the hope rising in her. I suppose I could. But it feels like I'm betraying Theo. He's been gone scarcely 2 weeks. Susan planted a kiss on Missy's cheek. I know, honey. But you cannot live out there in that tiny hovel all winter. You'll die. Surely, Theo would understand and forgive you. Feeling like a traitor, Missy stopped at the telegraph office on her way home and paid for a wire to be sent to the agency. Then, leading a burdened Jimmy back onto the road, Missy let herself weep for Theo. Chapter 6. Less than a week later, as Missy cut grass with the scythe old man Davis gave her, a cowboy rode up her lane. Seeing him, she dropped the tool and walked down the hill to greet him. He dismounted, tipping his hat and digging into his shirt pocket. Mrs. Cartwright, he said, pulling out bits of paper. I ride for the D-Cross Ranch down a ways and was just in town. The old guy that runs the office there done asked me to bring these to you, as I was ridin' by your place. Bemused, Missy accepted them. Thank you. How is Mr. Davis? Oh, he be as crotchety as ever, ma'am. The cowboy grinned. If he ain't yellin', somethin' is wrong. Give him my best. He tipped his hat again. I will, ma'am. Mounting his horse, he trotted away, waving to her as he turned left. He vanished minutes later. Missy opened the papers and read, her jaw dropping. No less than 5 marriage proposals burst out at her. One from Plum River, Wyoming Territory, one from Denver, Colorado Territory, 2 from Oregon, of all places, and 1 from Nevada. All promised to honor and cherish her, and 4 stated they owned property and bragged of their prominence in the community. The one from Nevada, however, reluctantly informed her that he had money to buy land with, but hadn't yet done so. He just moved there following the silver rush, and desired a bride to build a home with. Come build with me, she murmured. She glanced at the name. Mr. Jedediah Jones. She squinted at the sun. Mid-afternoon. Too late in the day to head for town, and the cows gazed at her with longing. If she cut enough grass to feed the cattle tonight and tomorrow, she could head to town in the morning and write her response to Mr. Jones. As she cut swathes of tall grass with the scythe, and raked them into piles, she pondered the most persuasive words that might convince the man to come to Nebraska. Though in her honesty, she must tell him that their marriage must be of convenience only. As a new widow, she must honor her husband's memory properly. If he agreed, and Missy doubted he would accept such terms, then maybe she and this Jedediah might build the place together as Theo had dreamed. She fed the cows, milked the goats, threw freshly cut grass down in the shed for Jimmy, and then, exhausted, went into her tiny lean-to to build a fire. After cooking a small meal of venison stew, she stood outside, despite the chill in the air. She gazed up at the stars. If you approve, Theo, she said. Help this to work out. I need him desperately. I can't sew this alone. Missy received her answer 3 days later. It was Susan and Bill who brought the telegram with them as they rode up, Bill on the horse and Susan on their big, raw-boned mule. Jimmy trotted to the fence, braying, at the sight of his old friends, and kept hollering until Bill slapped their mounts into the pasture with him. Of course, we wouldn't read it, Susan said, sitting down with Missy on the log beside her fire pit. Come on, I'm dying to know. Did someone accept? Her mouth dry, Missy read the telegram. He's coming here. Stunned, she handed Susan the missive. Jedediah Jones. Interesting name. He agreed to marry you under your conditions, and will arrive, on Saturday. What day is today? Wednesday. Missy seized Susan's hand. I can't do this by myself. Say you'll stand up with me. Please. Of course. I'm here for you. So is Bill. Missy breathed in, feeling her head swim. It is really happening. I'm marrying again. Do you want to send your answer? Bill asked. We're heading back through town. We can stop. Yes, if you don't mind. Write and say I will be there to meet him. How is he coming? She hurriedly scanned the note. By train, Bill said, his tone humored. The stage wouldn't be here that quickly. Oh, right. Yes, well, tell him I'll meet him at the train on Saturday, and we can be married straight away. You'll be there, right? Promise? Susan laughed at her desperation and kissed her cheek. We'll be there. Come, show us around your property. Chapter 7. Saturday arrived, and Missy put her best clothes in a bag, and hung it on Jimmy's rigged harness. She justified bringing the donkey along, as Mr. Jones might desire Jimmy to carry his things. Secretly, she admitted Jimmy had become her solace, and she needed the comfort only the stout donkey could offer. Hugging him and offering him corn, she led him down the road and prayed that Mr. Jedediah Jones was a good, kind Christian man who didn't believe in abusing his wife. Meeting Susan and Bill at the train station, she tied Jimmy to the rail and walked up the steps to the platform. She hugged Susan as Bill opened his pocket watch. The train should be here in an hour, he said. Provided it's on time. Let's get you into your best clothes, Susan said, her arm around Missy. 30 minutes later, Missy stood beside her friends in her best dress, her hair brushed until it shone and hanging down her back to her waist. She scrubbed her face and teeth, cleaned the dirt from under her nails, and permitted Susan to dab a tiny bit of scent behind her ears. Keep him wanting you, Susan said with a wicked giggle. Missy gasped in horror, then fell into a fit of nervous laughter. As the train came into view, casting smoke from its stacks and blowing its whistle, Missy waited with nervous impatience to meet her new husband-to-be. What if he doesn't like me? She hissed in Susan's ear. How can he not? Susan said back. You're lovely. He'll adore you. I seriously doubt that. I'm too thin, my nails are broken, and my best friend is a donkey. Her heart hammering in her chest, Missy waited as passengers alighted from the train, hailing family or friends, and, after gathering luggage, walked away. She held her breath as a tall, broad-shouldered young man with sandy brown hair, a mustache that drooped past his full lips, and lively hazel eyes stepped down. His expression somber, he gazed around until finding the three of them. Mrs. Cartwright? Missy almost choked. Yes. That's me. Jedediah Jones smiled, a very nice, boyish smile that revealed a mouthful of even, white teeth. He extended his hand. I'm Jed Jones. Missy curtsied, accepted his hand in one motion. A pleasure, Mr. Jones. These are my friends. Bill and Susan Briggs. Mr. Jones shook hands with each of them, yet his eyes never left Missy. I'm honored, Mr. and Mrs. Briggs, he said. I hope you will stand up with us. That's the plan, Bill said, slapping Jones on the back. The preacher is ready, although he don't like being kept waiting. Not knowing what else to do, Missy hurried down the steps and untied Jimmy. He nuzzled her hand, silently asking for corn, which Missy didn't have to give. Sorry, boy, she murmured, rubbing his head between his ears. Mr. Jones and Bill walked down the steps with carpet bags in hand, Susan bringing up the rear with her skirts hitched up so as not to trip on them. What's this? Jones asked, laughing. Your mount? My friend, Missy shot back, then blushed, and glanced away. He can carry your things, she murmured. Ah, yes. Of course. Jones hung his bags on the rigged harness, then extended his arm to Missy. I pray you will forgive my impertinence, Mrs. Cartwright. I'm a tad nervous, you understand. I've never been married before. Accepting his proffered arm, Missy smiled up at him. I'm nervous, too. I've never married a stranger before. His grin endeared her. Then we can be nervous together. Shall we?" The ceremony, presided over by the same expressionless preacher who prayed at Theo's funeral, went off without a hitch. Bill produced the wedding ring on cue as Susan stood as Missy's matron of honor. Missy, half listening to the preacher's droning voice, found her eyes glued to Jed's handsome, rugged face. She liked his looks, his smile, his easy confidence. While Theo's careless recklessness appealed to her when she married him, she liked Jed's steady, easygoing nature. She just hoped he took his responsibilities more seriously than Theo did. Arm in arm, she let Jed escort her from the church and hugged Susan as Jed and Bill shook hands. The preacher vanished. Secretly, she was both nervous and terrified that Jed would insist upon their marriage bed despite her need to mourn Theo. She said her goodbyes to Susan and Bill with Jed beside her. In truth, she couldn't permit a virtual stranger to touch her intimately. She wanted this to be a marriage of convenience, in name only, a partnership that didn't involve sharing a bed. Missy let Jed lead Jimmy as they walked home, her fears and worries riding her shoulders. She answered his questions about the property, the livestock, her plans for the future in a voice that didn't sound like her own. "I want a house by Christmas," she finally blurted. He pondered her remark with a seriousness that surprised her. She half thought he would lightheartedly promise he could build one in a week, something Theo would have said. "I do have some building skills," he said. "You say there are good trees by the river?" "Rivers mean mud, and mud can be used to fill in chinks and make the house airtight and warmer." "But by Christmas?" "I can't promise that." Relieved at his honesty, Missy said, "I've built a tiny barn for the goats, chickens, and Jimmy here. I had to protect them from varmints. In truth, it isn't much, but it works for now." "What are you using for shelter?" "A rickety shed." Might be tough to spend the winter in." "Before he died, Theo sawed lumber," she said. "And I collected rocks for a fireplace." He smiled. "Then we have a good start, don't we?" Chapter 8. Jed stared at the property in clear dismay. Missy's heart sank. Now he would turn his back on her, return to town, annul their fledgling marriage and vanish. She braced herself, holding her breath, waiting for the storm to strike. Jed turned to her with a faint smile. "A ways to go, eh?" She breathed again. You're not going to leave?" "Leave? Why ever would I?" "Because it's going to be so much work." "Do I look like I'm afraid of hard work?" He chuckled. "I knew what I was getting into when I agreed to come here and marry you. And you understand I can't, I'm not ready for," Missy blushed, turning her face away. Jed took her hand. "I knew that, too. But I believe in what you're trying to accomplish here, and it's not much different than what I would build in Nevada with you at my side." Gazing around, he nodded. "This land has promise, Missy. Good water, and with a little coaxing, the grass will come back. Plenty of wood for building a house. You like it then?" "Of course." She breathed deeply in relief and smiled. "Then perhaps we should get started." Trying to walk down the narrow lane, Jed held her back with his hand on hers. "I need to say something." Waiting, her fears trickling back, Missy regarded him with trepidation. She bit her lip. "I pray we will learn to love one another," he said. "And know this, lovely lady, I'll be right here when you're ready for me to be a husband to you." She stared at him, both embarrassed and strangely touched. Not knowing what to say, she led him toward the ramshackle lean-to and watched him eye it with concern. "Nope," he said finally. "That won't do when the snow starts flying. Not bad while the weather is mild, but winter in Nebraska is not known for its even temper." After he put his bags down, Missy showed him the start of the house and her tiny barn. The chickens scratched for bugs in the dirt and grass while the goats on their long tethers munched the short grass and eyed them dubiously. "You did this yourself?" he asked, looking over the barn. "Well, yes. The coyotes would steal my chickens and kill the goats." Jed pushed on the posts, and seemed surprised when they refused to shift. He grinned. "Admirable job." Removing Jimmy's harness and hanging it up, Missy opened the fence to allow him into the small pasture. Jed scrutinized the cattle. "Not a bad start for a cattle ranch," he said. "Nice bull." "He killed my husband," Missy said. "Never turn your back on him. Don't you worry about him harming you?" She shook her head. "I told him he owes me a herd and that he better behave if he doesn't want to get shot. Since then, he's been as quiet as Jimmy." Jed laughed and slung his arm over her shoulder. "You are something else, Mrs. Jones. You better not forget it, Mr. Jones." Chapter 9. Between Jed and Jimmy, progress on the house moved forward. Jed dug more holes in the ground for tall tree trunks that would serve to hold up the roof and to build interior walls. He cut down trees as Missy stripped them of heavy limbs and branches, and Jimmy pulled the trunks to the side of the house. Within a few days, Missy admired the basic frame of the three-room house. The main room with a future hearth, their bedroom, Missy flinched when she thought of sharing it with Jed, and a pantry where they would dig a deep root cellar and build a floor with a trap door over it. Jed cut the down trees into planks and planed them as Missy bored holes for the wooden pegs, daydreaming of Christmas in her new home and humming under her breath with growing contentment. Thus far, as September passed into October, the weather cooperated with sunny days and chilly nights. Missy and Jed slept on opposite sides of the fire pit, Missy grateful for Jed's company. Jed, a true gentleman, never asked her about Theo. Yet, he listened with sincere attention when she felt comfortable in talking about her deceased husband. In his turn, he shared his dreams of a piece of land to call his own, of a horse and cattle ranch, and children. While his dreams meshed with her own, Missy found it remarkable that Jed actually worked for his, when Theo loved to plan without really making anything happen. One hot, humid afternoon, Missy cut grass for the cattle, her palms sweaty on the wooden handle. "We must have a storm building," she thought, pausing to wipe sweat from her face. She studied the horizon, but no thunderheads appeared to confirm her suspicions. Even so, tingles danced lightly on her skin, and the light breeze smelled of rain. Maybe it'll be raining by tomorrow. Heaven knew, the prairie grass needed a boost in growth. Swinging the scythe again, her hands slipped. The sharp blade sliced through her dress and into her lower leg. At first, she felt no pain, and a fleeting thought that it missed cutting her crossed her mind. Then she felt warm blood trickling down into her shoe. "What have I done?" she groaned, stumbling to a nearby log. Sitting on it, she pulled her torn skirt aside and gazed at the deep wound in her calf. Blood gushed from it, and the pain shot upward to her knee. Frantic to stem the flow, Missy tore lengths from her skirt and wrapped them tightly around the wound. But the bleeding didn't stop. Frightened, she pushed herself up from the log and hobbled toward home. In order to get longer and better grass, she had ranged almost a half a mile away and had 2 hills between herself and her destination. Fearing she would bleed to death, she limped on, ascending one side, and hurrying down the other. Glancing back once, she discovered she left a wide, bloody trail. "Hope the coyotes aren't interested," she muttered. Climbing the next hill left her exhausted. Her sight swam as her head spun sickeningly. She didn't know if it was the heat or the blood loss, but either could cause her to pass out. Her leg gave out under her as she descended the second slope, and she fell with a sharp cry. Rolling, out of control, her body slapped into rocks and over deadwood, bruising and tearing her skin. Thumping into a stout granite stone, she lay for a moment, trying to catch her breath. "Jed," she yelled as loud as she managed. "Jed, help me. Jed. Missy? Where are you?" "I'm here. Help, please." Continuing to shout, weeping and dizzy with pain, Missy hoped he could follow her voice and find her. The blood rushing in her ears masked his answering yells, but she felt too weak to try to rise. She cried out, hoping he could hear her, fearing he could not. "Sweet Jesus." Jed knelt beside her, his hands sweeping her tangled hair from her face. "Where are you hurt?" My leg. Cut it. Bleeding." Jed didn't wait, or look at the wound. Picking her up in his arms, he rushed the remaining distance to the shed. Setting her gently down on her pallet, he pushed her skirts up to her knees, and closely examined what he could without removing her makeshift bandage. He smiled encouragement. "I think the bleeding stopped, Missy. But I'm going to have to stitch it." Rising, he built up the fire and tossed a chunk of wood on it and hurried out of the lean-to. Missy closed her eyes, her head still whirling, sweat blooming on her skin. She licked her dry lips. She was so thirsty. Jed returned with a bucket of water and set it beside her. From one of his bags, he pulled out a small wooden box, and set that, too, near her injured leg. "A drink?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Yes, of course." Jed filled a tin cup and held her head against his knee while she drank it down. "Thanks." Laying her head back, she watched him as he untied the bloody piece of her skirt and threw it aside. Taking a clean cloth, he soaked it in the water and started cleaning the wound. Refusing to scream at the tearing pain, Missy clenched her teeth. Still, she hissed as she drew breath and garnered a concerned glance from Jed's blue eyes. "Go on," she gritted. "Do what you have to. Good girl." From the box, he took out a small bottle. He showed it to her. "Whiskey," he said. "It's going to burn like tarnation, but it's got to be done." Missy nodded, gripping her skirts until her knuckles showed white. When he poured the alcohol on her cut, she lost control and screamed. Fire burned through her leg, hotter than the flames at her side. She cried, feeling Jed's hand stroking her face, her hair, murmuring words she couldn't make out. Gripping his arm, she gazed up through her tears as the burning pain eased. "Jed," she said weakly. "Jed." "Easy, girl," he murmured. "It's going to be all right. You'll be fine. Promise?" "Promise." Putting the whiskey back in the box, he held up a long needle and a long length of what appeared to be thread. "Catgut. I have to stick it, Missy, and it's going to hurt. But you'll heal faster." She nodded. "Do it." He was right. It hurt. But this she could bear more easily, and she answered Jed's smile as he worked. "You've done this before," she said, her throat raw. "I have. My father is a rather prominent doctor back east." That jolted her. "You didn't follow him into medicine?" "Nah. We had a falling out when I was 18. He gave me money, put me on a train west, and I never saw him again." "Oh. I'm sorry." "I'm not." Jed grinned. "He's a rather nasty fellow, even if he is an excellent doctor. He taught me a great deal, though, but I'm free of him. There." Jed cut the catgut with his knife and washed the needle in the water before placing it and the remaining thread carefully in the box. He rinsed his hands in the bucket, then pulled a roll of cotton cloth from his bag. "See," he said, holding it up. "Always prepared for an emergency." Missy smiled. "You'd have made a great doctor." "I know." He winked at her. "But I make a better rancher and husband." Missy reached for his hand. "You're a good man. Careful. That kind of talk might go to my head." He wrapped her leg in the bandage, then took his knife and began to cut away the bloody skirt from her. He met her eyes evenly. "I'm not trying to be fresh with you, but we can't have the scent of blood on the air. Who knows what it'll attract? I have to bury this and that bloody rag." "I know." After he sheared off her stained skirts and petticoats, he covered her decently with a blanket. "Don't," she said, "I'm so hot already." Frowning, he pressed the back of his hand to her brow. "You're feverish. You feel hot but your skin is cold." Bringing her a cup of fresh water, he held her head while she drank it. "Now, try to rest while I feed the stock and bring more wood in." Exhausted, Missy managed a light sleep while Jed was gone and roused when he returned with an armload of wood. Her rest hadn't helped matters. She felt shaky and ill, first hot, then cold and clammy. Jed gave her a quick nod, then departed with their cast iron pot in his hand. Though she knew she shouldn't compare Theo and Jed, she had no doubt that had she cut herself when Theo was alive, she probably wouldn't have survived. Setting the pot on its hook over the fire, Jed cut potatoes, onions, and venison into it, then added salt and wild sage. Nausea took over Missy's appetite. When she informed him of this, he gave her a stern look from under his brows. "You will eat, young lady," he said. "You're not going to give me any trouble over it, are you? I sure would hate to force this stew down your little gullet." As the stew simmered, Jed propped her up against the back wall of the shed and rested her injured leg on a pile of prairie grass. Fetching her water, he watched her until she drank it all, and then refilled it. Darkness crept in as the sun crossed behind the horizon. The heat and humidity failed to depart, however, and Missy grew uncomfortably warm. She began to doze off despite her discomfort, and Jed left to finish the chores for the evening. He woke her up to give her a bowl of stew and a spoon. His hand caressed her cheek, as she tried to smile. "I'm really not." "Shoo," he said. "Eat as much as you can." Missy managed to eat half her stew and a chunk of bread before handing her bowl back to Jed. "No more. I'm so tired." She drank more water before Jed helped her lie down and covered her with the blanket. Her leg throbbed to every beat of her heart. Her shakes intensified, and she trembled uncontrollably. Sitting beside her, Jed stroked his hand over her hair. "Get some sleep, honey," he murmured. "I'll watch over you." Chapter 10. Missy woke to the crash of thunder. Lightning flashed outside the lean-to, a violent blast of light that lit up the area like the sun at noon. On its heels, thunder exploded, making her cringe. She sat up wincing, while her leg protested. She felt the deep chill in the air as her blanket pooled in her lap. Jed slept sitting up with his back against the wall, his chin on his chest. That must be terribly uncomfortable. The fire had burned quite low, and she wondered if she should wake him and ask him to build it up or try to do it herself. Through the tiny window opening, she saw lightning strike a stunted tree on the far side of the cattle pasture, flames lighting its branches like a torch. Jed startled awake, bolting upright, glancing around to see her in the light of the next bolt. "Glory," he muttered, running his hands through his hair. "Are you all right?" "I don't know." Shivering, uncertain if it was the cold or the fever, she drew the blanket up to her chin. Though not afraid of thunderstorms, this one unnerved her, for she was inside inadequate shelter with the most violent storm she'd seen since coming there. Concerned, Jed touched her brow and cheeks, frowning. "I think your fever is gone. Here, I'll stoke up the fire." Throwing his own blanket over his shoulders, he hunched over the fire pit, adding kindling and blowing them up into a flame. Adding more wood as it caught, he had a nice blaze going. Thunder exploded overhead, and this time it wasn't just Missy who jumped. That was close. Like a pump opening up, the rain poured down. The deluge instantly put the tree fire out, and Missy discovered an icy drip in her corner of the shed. Jed helped her move closer to the fire, wrapping her snugly in an extra blanket. He pulled on her shoulder until she rested her head on his chest. Unable to halt her tears, Missy cried, shaking against him. She clung to him as she sobbed, her tears wetting his shirt. "What's wrong? Is it your leg? Tell me." "I miss Theo," she wailed, her long-suppressed grief at last bursting forth. "I miss him so much." Far from pushing her away as she expected upon her confession, Jed held her tightly, his free hand stroking her hair. He kissed her brow, murmuring nonsense words, letting her cry herself out. As the storm, muttering and growling, passed on, so did Missy's tears. The rain drummed the roof for a while, then tapered off into a light drizzle, then into nothing. Now worn out, warm and comfortable, Missy let herself drift back to sleep. Sunlight streaming into the shed woke her. She found herself lying beside the blazing fire, Jed nowhere in evidence. Yawning, she sat up, keeping the blankets wrapped tightly around her against the morning's chill. Her leg complained bitterly at her movement, but she found the pain more bearable now. Outside, the sunlight gleamed off the wet grass, and the chickens ventured into her sight, scratching at the mud. Morning. Jed ambled into the lean-to, ducking under its beams, grinning. A freshly skinned and gutted rabbit hung limp in his hand. Got a hankering for fried rabbit for breakfast. How about you? Missy stretched, yawning mightily, and smiled back. Sounds wonderful. A girl with sense, he said, setting a small grill over the fire, then put a flat pan on it. I like girls with sense, you know. Girls who don't like fried rabbit have no sense at all, I'm telling you. Recalling his tenderness the night before during the storm, Missy reached over to take his hand. Thank you. For the rabbit? Why, you are right welcome, Mrs. Jones. For last night. For letting me cry all over you. His eyes sparkled as he cupped her cheek. Holding grief and does you no good, honey. It just sits there and rots, like a canker, until it consumes you. By then, it's black and ugly and oozes like an infected sore. You sound like you speak from experience. He hesitated, then smiled. I do. Waggling his knife in front of her, he said, You keep on crying, Missy. Get it out of you. Only then can you live again. You're right. She gazed into the distance. I blamed Theo for everything. For bringing me to this wretched place, for buying that bull, for making promises he couldn't keep. I blamed him for leaving me. He always tried to do the right thing, but he never had a thought that went beyond the end of his nose. He jumped when he should have walked. She smiled at Jed. Just know that I loved him. I never doubted it. Give me time, Jed. Will you do that? All the time in the world, honey. Chapter 11. The day after the storm, as Missy lay in the sun as Jed ordered her to, resting and healing, two riders walked their mounts down their narrow lane. It was Susan and Bill. Missy tried to cover her wounded leg for decency's sake, too late, however, for both of them saw the bandage. Susan was off her mule and running to Missy's side. Dear Lord, what happened? Cutting grass, Missy answered. The scythe slipped. I don't need to ask if it was bad. It was, Jed remarked, coming out from behind the lean-to where he had been boring holes in the boards for the pegs. She lost a lot of blood and ran a fever. If she stays put for a while and lets it heal, she'll be walking in a few days. Missy wrinkled her nose at him. So says Doc Jones. Doctor? Susan glanced from Missy to Jed and back again. His father is a doctor back east, Missy said. And I'll admit, with reluctance, he does know how to stitch a wound. You're just jealous that my sewing is better than yours. Susan laughed. And here I worried you two would hate one another. Oh, we do, Jed said agreeably, shaking Bill's hand. She hates my cooking, and I hate her disregard for her own safety. Missy glared at him, indignant. I complimented your fried rabbit. Under duress. Bill chuckled. I reckon we arrived just in time. With Missy indisposed, I'm guessing you need an extra hand building that house. I can give you a few days, but Susan will have to get home and feed the stock. But for now, Susan announced, I will do what I can to help. With Missy watching and calling encouragement or suggestions, the men set to adding walls to the interior of the house, laying the foundation for a fireplace hearth with some of Missy's river stones, and cutting down another tree. Susan fed the chickens and goats, rubbed Jimmy's long ears, and gathered grass for the cattle. She cooked lunch from their stores, hot fresh biscuits, fried ham and potatoes. The men came at her call, washed hands in the water bucket and devoured the hot, delicious meal. Missy, her appetite not quite returned, ate a biscuit and a small helping of ham and potatoes. Of course, Susan scolded her. You need to eat more, Missy. You can't heal on an empty stomach. I keep telling her that, but she don't listen to me. Missy glared at Jed. I'm not hungry. And I am healing. My leg hardly hurts at all now. Next, she'll be asking me to take her dancing, Jed complained, devouring another biscuit, licking crumbs from his fingers. He grinned impudently when Missy rolled her eyes. I wonder why I worried about you too, Susan said, eyeing them sidelong. He's insufferable. She's cantankerous. Oh, they're in love, Bill stated firmly, rising and dusting off the seat of his breeches. In another day, they'll be swooning over each other. Will not. Can't. She hates my guts. Susan chuckled and cleared away the dishes to wash as the men, belching, ambled back to work. By the time Susan rode her big mule back down the road, the house had taken on a very homey appearance. The tall tree trunks now supported 2 half walls, a framework for holding up the roof, and a layer of river rocks for the foundation of a fireplace. As the men cared for the stock, bringing the goats, chickens, and Jimmy into the barn, Missy kept the fire going by adding wood. Jed may have forbidden it had he seen, but she hobbled to their stores of food and collected the last of their smoked beef, fresh eggs, and a bundle of corn on the cob. By the time darkness fell, and the men returned, she had corn roasting on the fire, beef sliced and in the pan, along with the eggs ready for frying. Jed turned to Bill, his hands spread in exasperation. What do I do with her? She will not listen to reason and does exactly as she pleases. Bill clapped Jed on the shoulder. You married her. As Missy giggled into her dinner, Jed and Bill talked of what they planned to do on the morrow. Tired, Missy limped into the lean-to and to her pallet, drawing her blanket over her shoulders. To the soft noise of the men talking, Missy drifted to sleep. She dreamed of Theo. I don't mind you marrying him, Missy, Theo said. Love him. He's good for you. But Theo, she said, reaching for him. I love you. I know, darlin'. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Theo faded as Missy reached for him. No. Don't leave me. I'll never really leave you, darling. His voice sounded faint. I'm here, with you, always. Remember that. Missy roused with the sun barely over the horizon. Jed slept on the far side of the fire while Bill snored lightly just outside the lean-to. Theo's voice still echoed in her head as she sat up, huddling under her blanket, listening to the birds chirp in the pre-dawn light. I love you, Theo. I always will. But I have to move on without you. I know, his voice seemed to whisper on the early morning breeze. Be well, my love. When the men finally woke, Missy had built up the fire, and had started preparing a breakfast of ham and onions, sprinkled with wild sage, and a pan of fried bread cooked with grease from the rabbit. Morning, boys, she said cheerfully, as they yawned into their fists. Breakfast will be served as soon as you wash. By the time Susan returned for Bill, the house had progressed to 3 solid exterior walls, and Missy walked, albeit slowly, able to renew some of her former work. Side by side, hand in hand, Missy and Jed waved as their friends rode away. We'll be back, Susan yelled over her shoulder. Limited by Jed, Missy took over only some of her previous work, boring holes in the lumber, as this was a task she could perform sitting down. But over the next week, her wound healed enough to permit Jed to pull her stitches. He still forbade her to walk far and insisted she perform tasks that allowed her to sit. Despite the advancements on the house while Bill helped, time passed quickly and the house progress slowed to a crawl. Missy despaired of having the house finished by Christmas. Their first snowfall came in November. Huddling in their shelter behind a huge fire, Missy and Jed shared each other's warmth as they watched the wet snow collect on the ground outside. Missy came close to panic. How can we finish the house in this, she groaned. We'll die in here. Jed held her face in his hands, gazing earnestly into her brimming eyes. No, we won't. I won't let it happen. You hear me? I won't. He held her as she wept into his chest. As she sniffled, a tender emotion rose into her heart. At first, she didn't recognize it. It seemed unreal, it was so unexpected. It wasn't until after her crying ended, and she relaxed in Jed's strong arms did she realize what it was. Love. Chapter 12. As Missy helped Jed with the house, she watched him. When she fed the stock and brought the chickens, goats, and Jimmy into the barn, she studied him. As he took his jacket off in the break in the weather, while carrying lumber or chopping down a tree, her eyes followed him. After the snowstorm blew itself out, and the snow melted rapidly, she knew deep in her heart that she loved Jed. She craved to be in his arms at night, longed for him to kiss her, silently begged him to look at her the way she now looked at him. Did he love her in return? Missy didn't know, nor did she dare ask. She shot flirtatious comments at him and saw him grin. They worked side by side on the house, but he continued to sleep on the far side of the fire from her at night. She couldn't tell if his actions were those of a husband in future love, or those of a man who accepted his role as a convenient spouse. While she knew her actions at the time had been right to lay the boundaries of their relationship, she now had no idea how to drop them. Or inform him they were over. As their house grew, so did her love. What would happen when it was finished? As November progressed into December, snow fell more frequently. While it melted almost immediately, leaving sticky mud behind, Missy's despair grew. The house was not finished, and might not be completed by Christmas. As the nights grew colder, sleeping in the shed became a problem. They both wore many layers of clothes, added more grass to their pallets to protect them from the ground, but still they shivered through the night. Now walking as well as ever, Missy insisted upon helping Jed with the tougher tasks of house building. While Jed cut tree trunks into planks, Missy took the axe and chopped down another. Their house now had 4 stout walls and a fireplace, but lacked a chimney, a floor, the roof and the root cellar. As Jed shoveled dirt out of the future pantry, Missy took much of it into a bucket, added water and prairie grass, and mixed clay to work it into the chinks between the planks. Despite Jed's arguments that she shouldn't do it, Missy slathered the mud and grass mix and built the beginnings of their chimney with the river rocks. Early one frosty morning, Missy harnessed Jimmy while Jed dug through his belongings for cash. "Here's $10, he said, handing her a small wad of bills. "That's too much," she protested. "Maybe. But we are very low on supplies, and we need extra blankets, too." "We can get by on those we have, Jed." "Neither of us has much for winter clothing," he replied, his expression grave. "We'll need to fashion those into serapes." Missy nodded. "You're right. Anything else?" As she lifted her face up, she hoped he would kiss her. Even a tiny peck on her lips might indicate that his feelings for her had grown. After recognizing that she had fallen in love with him those weeks ago, Missy still had no idea if Jed loved her in return. And now, he did not kiss her as she hoped, but instead rigged Jimmy's harness to make carrying sacks easier. "Be careful," he said as she picked up Jimmy's lead rope, disappointment threading through her. "You, too." He didn't say anything else as she turned away to walk down their lane to the road. Once there, she glanced back, hoping to see him watching her, but he had vanished into the house. "He doesn't love me." Depression accompanied her as she walked toward the village. She'd told him how much she loved Theo, and no man liked being reminded that his wife loved another man, even if that man was dead. Too often Jed saw her at Theo's grave, placing wildflowers on it. Despite knowing how he accepted her grief, Missy suspected Jed didn't appreciate competing with a dead man for her affections. "Maybe I should just tell him how I feel." However, the thought made her balk. "If I tell him I love him, and he says to me thanks, but I don't love you, I married you for your property, I'll just die. I know I will." She tried to remember his touching concern for her when she hurt herself, and how he held her during the storm. But did that equate to love on his part? Theo never made a secret about anything, much less his feelings. Perhaps Jed simply wasn't as vocal as Theo. Giving up, Missy walked on down the road, feeling the sun's rays warm her face. Few travelers shared the road with her, but she waved to those she saw. Mr. Davis's boys hooped and galloped their tall horses past her, going the other way, and she grinned at their juvenile antics. She hoped that if she ever had boys, they would grow up to be like those too, full of spunk. Tying Jimmy to the rail outside the general store, Missy went inside. During her months living in Nebraska, she had grown friendly with the proprietor, Wilbur Smith. "Good morning, Mr. Smith," she called over the jangling of the bell on the door. "How are you today?" The tall, bald man in the white apron examined her over his rimless spectacles. "Mrs. Jones," he replied gravely. "I am well, thank you. Though I heard you had a bit of a debacle out there on the prairie. I trust you have healed appropriately? She pirouetted. Healed just fine. Now what can I get for you this fine, cold day? While he gathered the sacks of flour, salt, sugar, coffee, ground corn and a small pot of spices, Missy examined the pile of thick woolen blankets. After picking out 2 of what she deemed as the thickest, she set them on the counter and went to the bolts of cloth on the shelves. See something you like? She did. She fingered the heavy blue cotton, thinking that she would make Jed a shirt for Christmas. He liked blue. 2 yards of this, Mr. Smith, she said. She added thread and buttons to her purchases, paid Mr. Smith, and put the rest of the money away in her small handbag. He loaded up Jimmy for her, then stood on the walk watching her as she led her donkey down the street. She turned and waved, and he sedately lifted his hand in return. As she walked, she planned out the shirt she would make, and how she could keep it a secret from Jed until Christmas Day. Missy arrived home in the early afternoon, hungry, and found Jed had already eaten a quick, cold meal without her. He waved at her from where he hacked branches from a downed tree. Shoving down her disappointment that he hadn't waited for her to eat with him, she unloaded the supplies, unharnessed Jimmy, and turned him loose to graze. Munching on a few pieces of cold meat and a chunk of cornbread, Missy washed it down with fresh water. Sighing, she returned to her work mixing mud and grass into the thick paste that would seal their house up nice and tight. We have a storm coming, Jed commented a few days later. Missy paused in adding a stone to her growing fireplace chimney and studied the lowering clouds. The wind had picked up, sending a bitter chill against her skin. Yet, it failed to cut through the heavy blankets they wore as ponchos, with a rope around their waists for belts. Jed sewed some rudimentary mittens for each of them out of rabbit pelts and created thin leather socks to keep their feet warmer inside their shoes. A nasty storm would halt work on the house, and despite their added clothing, might well freeze them out. How long will it take to put a roof on? She asked, biting her lip. Jed frowned. 4, maybe 5 days. Christmas is next week. I know. But with this storm, we may not have it finished by then. We may celebrate it in the lean-to. Jed, this storm may kill us. Even with a fire and all these blankets, we could freeze to death. It's already too cold to be sleeping like we do. He shrugged, helpless. What would you have me do? We're already working ourselves nearly to death as it is. We can't work all day and all night. 2. Angry and frightened, Missy turned her back on him and slathered her mud mixture over the top of the chimney, which was as tall as she was. She settled a rock on it, then added more mud. From the corner of her eye, she saw Jed watching her for a long time before he turned and vanished behind the wall of the house. She heard him digging in the root cellar again, which was now deep enough to require a ladder to go into and come back up. Pushing mud into the chinks between the rocks, Missy grew more and more convinced that Jed didn't, and never would, love her. Theirs would simply be a partnership to survive this hard land, a marriage in name only. Reckon he should make 2 small beds rather than 1 large one. Sadness and despair filled her heart, and she wept silently. Her tears were not just for herself, but for the children they would never have. Darkness fell, and the icy wind picked up. The storm Jed predicted was on them. She gathered the goats and Jimmy, and found the chickens already roosting in the tiny barn. Trudging toward their shelter, she heard the sound of hammering. In the light of the fire, Jed used their precious nails to add lengths of planking to their meager shelter. He glanced at her over his shoulder. These will help keep the wind and snow out, he explained. Without answering him, Missy went inside and began to put together their supper. Jed had killed a young turkey the day before, thus she spitted it over the fire to roast. Spicing it with wild sage and mint, she made fresh cornbread biscuits, and put potatoes in the coals to cook. Smells wonderful, Jed commented as he hung a blanket over the small opening he left so they could come and go from the shelter. He weighted the end of it with rocks so the wind wouldn't blow it open. She offered him a quick smile at his compliment but didn't answer him. She knew he watched her with a puzzled expression, but he didn't speak. Over the crackling of the fire, Missy listened to the wind howl and shriek outside, and pushed the blanket aside to look. Whipped by the wind, snow whirled past in a maelstrom of deadly white fury. Though their shelter was considerably warmer with the added planks, she knew there were too many cracks in the walls to prevent the wind from freezing them to death. After they ate, Jed added more wood to the fire from the fairly large pile well within reach. Missy wrapped herself in as many blankets as she could, and lay down on her pallet. Soon Jed was snoring lightly. Rising, she sat cross-legged by the fire with her blankets over her shoulders and the beginnings of Jed's Christmas present in her lap. For the next 3 hours she sewed as he slept, until her eyes could no longer remain open. Hiding the shirt beneath her pallet of grass, she lay back down, and slept under the rage of the storm. Chapter 13. By working at a frantic pace, Missy and Jed completed the roof. Bitter cold sucked the warmth from their bodies, and sleeping behind the added wall hardly made a difference when the temperatures dropped to killing levels and the wind howled. Missy fretted that this cold would kill their fledgling herd of cattle, but they sought shelter under the trees by the river and seemed unperturbed with their thickened hides. Unable to sleep because of the deep and abiding cold, Missy worked on the shirt while Jed slept. She knew his sleep wasn't restful, for he tossed and turned, and every morning there were dark circles under his eyes. 2 days before Christmas, Jed stood watching the sky and sniffing the wind. "We have another bad one coming, Missy." "When?" "Tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow night." She gazed at the nearly completed house, but its chimney wasn't finished and it had no door. "We won't make it, will we?" "The house?" "No. We can't survive another storm in that hovel." He gazed at her, his blue eyes frightened. Frightened. He knew she was right. Another storm would be the death of them if they tried to stay in their inadequate shelter. Without another word, Missy added water and grass to the dirt in the bucket and went to work. Little by little the chimney rose in height, Jed standing on a makeshift ladder to add the stones and the mud and clay to its top. Missy mixed the mud, lifted the heavy stones over her head to him one by one. As day turned to dusk, Missy lit candles for light, and they continued working until well after dark. Too exhausted to cook, she prepared a cold meal of ham and bread, then lay on her pallet to sleep. Jed gathered wood to keep the fire going all night, then she heard his light snores before sleep took her. For the first time in a long while, she slept all night without waking. Christmas Eve. Only a few more rocks were needed to complete the chimney the next morning. But the coldest wind Missy had felt thus far picked up, freezing her face, and numbing her hands. Jed dismantled the planks from their shed and the ladder, using them to build a door. "Start moving our things inside," he gasped over the howling wind and the snow blowing in his face. "We have no choice, we have to stay inside the house tonight." Instead of feeling triumph and excitement, her house finished by Christmas, all Missy felt was terror. Was it weatherproof enough? Did she add enough adobe to keep the wind and snow out? Would the chimney fall under the strength of the fierce wind? She kept her fears to herself as she hurried back and forth with their stores of food, their clothes in bags, and their blankets, moving everything into the house. Not able to feel her hands inside her mittens, she gathered their cut firewood, and placed it on the wood floor beside the hearth. Her constant movement kept her warm enough, yet she shivered uncontrollably as she brought coals in a pan to start a new fire inside the house. While Jed hung the door, Missy fed the stock, and went to their shelter for the gunny sacks she had sewn together for a mattress. She filled it with the dried grass from their pallets, and while it was sadly flat, she thought it enough to keep them off the wood flooring. Dragging it through the snow and into the house, she hesitated. The house was warm. While she was out, the fire she'd built heated the interior, and the chimney drew the smoke up and out. No wind cut through the stout walls. No snow swirled through cracks. She turned to Jed as he closed their new door behind him, shutting out the late afternoon and the howling blizzard. "We did it," she half yelled. "Our own house for Christmas." Jed gazed around as though never seeing it before, his jaw slack. "Why, Mrs. Jones, I do believe you're right. You're a joker, Mr. Jones." Missy went to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, his warmth thawing her hands. Holding her tight, he brushed a kiss against her wet hair. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Jones." Missy gazed up at him, tears wetting her cheeks. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Jones. What say we hang up these wet things and start supper?" he asked, his knuckles stroking the hair from her cheeks. "I seem to recall a tradition in my family. A special meal on a special night." Missy frowned slightly. "Well, we still have ham left, and cornbread." "Oh, no, no, no," he groaned, shaking his head. "We Joneses always cook a goose on Christmas Eve. But we don't have." "Not another word, my dear." Leaving her to strip her wet serape from her shoulders and hang it up on a peg on the wall, Jed crossed into their pantry and vanished. She heard him moving planks around, and wondered what he was up to. Shivering but warming rapidly, she stood as close to the fire as she dared without burning herself. Jed returned, proudly holding the carcass of a plucked and gutted goose. "Here you go," he said. "One Christmas goose. Kept cold and fresh by this wonderful Nebraska weather." She gasped. "When did you?" "While you were risking your health washing our clothes in the cold river the other day. This fellow wandered too far from his flock and became entangled in the net I made. Poor thing. But, my dear wife, we should get him on the spit." As she helped Jed run the spit through the goose and set it on the prongs built into the fireplace, she gazed at him, loving him with every beat of her heart. "Jed," she began. "No, wait," he said, removing his own poncho and mittens. "One more surprise." Tapping the end of her nose with his finger, Jed winked at her, then disappeared into their bedroom. Bemused, she waited as he returned with a small pine tree in his hand. "No Christmas is complete without a Christmas tree," he said, leaning it against the wall. Staring at it, and realizing the lengths he had gone to make this a wonderful and memorable Christmas for her, Missy went to him. "I'll fetch a bucket to put it in so it stands upright," he said, then grinned. "After I warm up a tad. I have a gift for you, too, Jed." His brows rose. "You do?" Missy nodded and brought her hand out from behind her back. She held up the shirt she made for him, holding it against his shoulders. "Merry Christmas, my husband." For once, she had silenced him, and he stared down at her, his eyes shining. "How did you?" "At night," she said simply. "While you slept." "Missy." Jed took her in his arms, and kissed her deeply, lovingly. Missy relaxed into him, her arms around his neck. Her heart felt full to bursting, and she thought it might easily explode in her chest. Laying her head against his shoulder, she murmured, "I love you." Jed tilted her face up to his, and kissed her again. "I love you, too." When she could breathe, she stared up at him. "I was so scared." "Of what?" "That you couldn't love me. That I pushed you away." He chuckled. "I always figured that if you could love one man so passionately, you could love another. I fell for you almost right away, you know. I just knew I needed to give you time. And during the time you gave me, I fell in love again. I love you so much, Mr. Jones. And I love you, Mrs. Jones. Now, let's tend to that goose." The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susannah Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susannah Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susannah Calloway Western romance.